What can statistics reveal for those of us left behind? Hi, I'm Jeff Jackson, and I counsel people who've lost someone they love to suicide. In this video, I want to walk through some suicide statistics with you. Now, I'm not going to just spit out a bunch of numbers. You can get all the data you want by going to the AFSP website. I want to talk about what we as suicide loss survivors can learn from this data that might be helpful in our healing. The first problem statistics present to survivors is that they, by definition, deal with large numbers of people, entire demographics, and parts of the entire population spanning many years. But we really only care about one case, the person we lost. Does it really help to know what the numbers are or aren't for their particular demographic? I don't think so. However, I do think there are still insights we can learn from them. For example, when I look at suicide statistics, the first thing that jumps out at me is that they haven't really changed all that much. Now, if we believe the media, suicide rates are going up, 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 and the pandemic had everyone racing to their window ledge. But in reality, there really hasn't been dramatic change. Take a look at this chart, which tracks suicide rates in the US all the way back to 1950. For men, the rate per 100,000 citizens goes from 21.2 to 23. And for women, the rate goes from 5.6 in 1950 to 5.9 in 2022. Now, yes, that's an increase for both of those numbers. And there are some groups like teens that have seen even greater increases. But tell the truth, didn't you expect to see a chart that went straight up like Mount Everest? But you may say, wait a minute, I've read plenty of stories about suicide rates going up dramatically. And that's where statistics get tricky. If one article looks at a short period of time, say a single decade, it might show a sharp increase, maybe across the board or maybe in one demographic. Or if a rate goes from 20 per 100,000 to 24 per 100,000, that is a 20% increase, which sounds alarming. But the chart I just showed spans over 70 years, and more data means more clarity. But my biggest question is, why haven't the suicide rates gone down? In 1950, suicide carried tremendous stigma, and there were hardly any resources available for people suffering with suicidal ideation. Today, we have the 988 hotline, we have Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, National Suicide Prevention Week, and every September 10th is Worldwide Suicide Prevention Day. To combat youth suicide, programs have been established in many school systems, and educators now have access to special training to prepare them as frontline interventionists. It's safe to say that as a society, our awareness of suicide and our efforts to prevent it have never been stronger or more widely adopted. So why isn't the suicide rate going down? And if suicide is a byproduct of depression, well, the consumption of antidepressants has quadrupled over the past few decades. And antidepressants do work for most people, but that hasn't made a dent in the suicide rate. To me, this clearly supports the idea that mental health professionals may have been looking at suicide all wrong. And in my video, What Does Science Say?, I describe how that's starting to change. But here's one big takeaway from all this data that should be important to survivors, no matter which way you look at it. Preventing suicide is really, really hard to do. Even when you know it's a possibility, even when you know there have been previous attempts and current threats, even when you have all the best resources at your fingertips, far too often we are powerless to prevent a suicide. Remember that the next time you find yourself thinking you should have done more. Even the professionals struggle to prevent suicide. Another important thing this chart tells us, and it's something too that hasn't changed much in 75 years, male suicides outnumber females by about 4 to 1, and they always have. Why? Well, some have said that it's because men by nature are more aggressive and violent, so if they have suicidal tendencies, they're more likely to enact them with deadly force. That may be true, but I think there's one other factor that has at least as much impact, maybe more. Men are conditioned by society to not admit weakness. So when they're struggling with their mental health, they are far less likely to reach out for help, to tell someone they're hurting or to let their vulnerability show, not even to the people closest to them. I can't think of a stronger argument why old school notions of masculinity can be really harmful to women and to men. You can find lots of other statistics that break things down by geography, demographic, ethnicity, method. But again, that isn't really relevant to our healing when we only care about one suicide. But I think the few things I've pointed out do shed some light from which we survivors can draw some clarity. And if this video has brought you a little clarity, then subscribe or follow, and check out my other videos at makingsenseofsuicide.health.